also talk about other places besides Alaska, but mostly it's Alaska themed.
Alrighty, folks. Welcome back to the Mushing Alaska podcast. Super excited to be back with Sean. It's been a while since we've talked. I mean, obviously the race ended nearly 2.5 weeks ish ago. And we've talked a little bit, but we haven't really broken down Sean's experience out there and stuff like that. So anyways, Sean, it's good to have you back, man. How's it going? How you doing, man? How you been?
Pretty good. It's I can't believe it's March 31st when we're recording this. There's like 6 hours of March left. And I don't know where it went, but yeah, most of it was on the trail. It was cool to get to fly to the checkpoints and see the race from within. And got back and just kind of been hectic getting back and starting to kind of slowly get back to real life here. But yeah, man, I'm good, man. And it's snowing right now. Been snowing all day, and I'm excited to see some snow. It just looks like winter for the first time in a while.
Yeah, of course. There's snow's falling after the Iditarod's over. Yeah, funny how that works. We talked about the lack of snow this entire season, and now it's been snowing for you guys.
Yeah, I'm sure there's still dirt trail out there, but yeah, it was funny to hear how most of the people that were pro Fairbanks start by the end of the race, or even not even by the end, by about third of the way in, they were like, man, I think those 80 miles of dirt might have been pretty nice.
Yeah, maybe before what was it? What was the checkpoint but when they went south?
Caltag,
yeah.
Yeah, what's the Eagle Island vibes were? Oh, excuse me. The Eagle Island vibes were, yeah. People were like, "Oh man, this is a pretty hard one."
Yeah. No, dude, I feel you on the month of March. In the past, last year was your first year doing this. We going out with the insider, and so it was my first year doing it without you. So I wisely took some time off of work so that I could kind of have my ducks in a row, if you can call it that. This year, I did not take time off from work. So, we're in the middle of one of the longer Iditarod races, at least recently. And then work-wise, I had a run of 20 presentations for work that were just like absolutely like just destroying me. I was just so done. So we are happy to be back together. We're happy to chat. And with that, we're actually not going to spend a lot of time on the Iditarod because I think there's a lot to break down and catch up on within that experience, both my perspective, Sean's perspective, obviously being out there. Can't wait to break that down and like pick his brain and all of that. So we're going to do our own kind of Iditarod 25 recap experience, if you will. And today we're going to kind of focus on the end of what is the 2025 mushing season. We're obviously super excited to talk about our guest. Sean hit me like, I was surprised he was already like, dude, I already got a guest, because like we just talked about crazy month, but Sean got back, and I think, dude, what was it? You were back for like a couple of days, and you're like, yeah, I just get a text like, are you available during the normal times that you're available? I was like, yeah. I'm like, well, what do you got lined up? And well, tell us, Sean.
Oh, 1985 champ Libby Riddles is our next guest. That was cool. She reached out on Facebook and about she was like, oh yeah, I've been watching the live streams. It's fun to hear you talking. And I'm sure she was just saying good job out there. And I was like, oh, thanks. Actually that reminds me, you want to be on the podcast. And she was like, sure. So she was I know she talks about Iditarod and sled dogs, all summer long to tourists and the people on cruise ships. And it was cool to get to talk to her and it be, a little more in depth and targeted conversation. I learned that I just don't know anything about the 80s Iditarod, so it was, I was kind of humbled and also just like so much great information. And I honestly had more questions at the end than I did at the beginning, but it was just such a cool experience.
Yeah, I guess we'll give our synopsis of this before we get into a couple of things, but since we're here, we might as well. Yeah, I agree with Sean. It was a good time. She was a great guest. Hour and a half just absolutely flew by. I mean, I feel like we just barely scratched the surface with her, honestly. And we kind of talk about how she does these for the cruise line in Juneau, and she lives there for like half the year or whatever. But like I'm sure that's kind of like something that she has like a normal routine in terms of what she talks about with her speech or whatnot. And so, like Sean said, getting to ask some more specific questions, it was fun. And obviously for me, I don't know anything about the 80s in that era, but getting a winner on from the 80s, I think is awesome. The fact that it's the first female, that I think that's also awesome. And hearing her story was super interesting. So you'll kind of hear in our conversation, we're like, all right, well, we don't know a lot about this era, but like no one's getting any younger and everyone has some good stories and stuff to tell. So this I think is going to open the door to maybe looking at some other guests that aren't just in the current era of mushing, but also, kind of opening up the doors to some wider spectrum guests, if you will. So yeah, super, super excited about this one. And shout out to Sean and for getting, setting it up. And yeah. So any other thoughts?
Oh man, I was like, it's like hard to do, research on 1985 Iditarod, yeah, Libby Riddles. You know who won all the Iditarods, but like, I didn't even heard of the second place guy, like,
right.
It's tough. So I'm like, you just I kind of hear like green tour guides tell me about like Libby Riddles up here. They'll be like, yeah, Libby Riddles. She's like the first woman to win the Iditarod. Like all the men were waiting in Shaktoolik, and she decided to go into the storm. So like I had this idea from people that didn't even really haven't spent time with, dogs up here. But like this just been here. I just been working in sled dog tourism for 5 or 6 years. So you just like hear these things, and I like just in some point just accepted it as fact. So I had this idea of like, she showed up to like a Shaktoolik, like, 10th or 15th or place, and everyone was waiting out a storm, and she went through like, I don't care about no storm. But no, she was already like in first place, like couple hundred miles ago, so she was like, she and then the coolest part, I didn't know that her dog team, she was dating a dude, I can't remember his name, but Joe or something, and he finished third the year before with the same dogs. She won, and then I think he finished like second, or maybe I have the order wrong, but like a badass dog team, like just a once in a lifetime kind of dog team, I think. And then of course some amazing dog drivers, the two of them. And so it was really cool. Like I said, I would just learn so much, man. And
Joe Garney is who Sean's talking about. And that was an interesting, she talks about it, so we don't have to like give away too much of the information, but essentially Joe is from Teller, Alaska, which is a very remote area in the northwest part of Alaska. It's on the coast. Do I have that right, Sean?
Yeah, it's like on the northern end of the Seward Peninsula, which is like Nome is on the southern end of the peninsula. And if you cross the whole peninsula up to the north, there's like, that's Teller's up there.
Yep. And it's essentially about we plugged it in when during chatting with her, it's like 80-ish miles if you were to go from Nome to Teller. So yeah, it was just interesting hearing that. And yeah, so in 84, Joe got third, and then Libby won in 85, and then in 86, Susan won, but Joe got second. So those dogs really had a nice little 3-year run there where they kicked some ass. So yeah, that was a little bit of a preview of our time with Libby, and we hope that you all enjoy that. And with the release of this, it would make sense to also briefly kind of talk about the Kobuck 440. It's our last. It's kind of like the last bigger race of the season. I know that we had the T-Dog 2 weekends ago. But we usually like to talk about the Kobuck and just kind of give a little bit of some thoughts going into it. Coming off of last year, we got Jesse Holmes who won it, and then he's obviously off the Iditarod win this year. So, I would probably think that he is the favorite there. But what are your thoughts, Sean, on the Kobuck this year, and just anything? Just without asking a specific question, thoughts on the Kobuck?
It was cool to see Lauro leaving Nome and going back like east on the trail to Koyuk, and then crossing that peninsula, and then going up to Cots from there, and just a really, it's not like he's the first musher to do that, but he had, there's snow machines around and stuff. I don't know, but I mean, it's just that's a cool thing. I mean, just going right from Nome over to Kotzebue, and I'm just kind of interested to see what he's got in store with it for his team. If he's just like, I mean, his team's got to be just so trail like hardened and just like robust and dialed in, and they didn't get that trip back home, so it's just kind of their home is the trail right at this point for them. They've been on the trail for literally a month, and so I'm just kind of interested to see like what are his intentions. And but yeah, I mean, Jesse Holmes is obviously the king up there. It'll be interesting to see. Hugh Neff is up there running. He's I've seen him around a lot of the races this winter. He's been in Alaska, and so I'm also interested to see what his intentions are.
He's won the Kobuck before.
Yeah, and he could totally. He's never been shy to go for it, and
he's running a team of Dean Osmar's dogs. So,
and he's been training. I've seen he's very active on the Facebook, so I see him out there doing. He's been spent some time with the dogs this winter, but yeah, I mean, they're not. There's obviously not his dogs, but I think he's known them for maybe more than just this season.
Yep.
And then there's like some fun rookies up there. Like this is a fun little inner rivalry that I learned about this weekend. Is Sam Paperman and Sadie Lindquist grew up together, and they're like a year apart.
Okay.
And they're, Sadie's from Moose Pass, which is like on the way to Seward, and she's like not even, Moose Pass is just a little blip on the highway, and then she's not even in Moose Pass. She's like, way out there, and she grew up there, and then, Sam in Seward. And so he's running Travis Beals' dogs, and Sadie's running Miss Seavey's dogs. And I think they both have young teams that just ran the Iditarod. Mostly, I'm sure they have some other ones that are plugged in, but
so let's connect the dots there. So Sadie's running Calvin Doherty's team, and Sam would be running. Who is the B team for Travis this year?
Eb Peterson.
Okay, there we go. Thank you. Okay,
yeah. So they're running like two teams that finished, same day of Iditarod, but like Calvin's dogs were definitely had some serious flew down the trail, down the coast. So, I would say just based on the dog's performance,
his time. I mean, he had the fastest time. I know he didn't win the award, but he had the fastest time to know.
That'd be interesting to see, and just seeing the rookies, like, people come back from Kobuk and they're like, dude, Iditarod was a vacation. Kobuk is, but this year I feel like Iditarod was definitely not a vacation, but it'll be just interesting. Who are some of the other names you're looking at?
Well, so some things in my mind that I was going to say. So Anna Hennessy is in this race.
Oh, nice.
So
yeah, it's Emily Ford's team from Shameless Huskies there with that.
So I'm wondering if because I was going to say something, but maybe you have more knowledge of their situation. But like Shameless Huskies, is that their kennel or are they okay?
Kathleen Frederick.
That's Kathleen. That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So
those dogs are badass, dude. Like I don't think like Kathleen Frederick's never been accused of being a competitive musher. Like, but she's fielded like team after team after team after team of these like rookie mushers. And now I'll say, Anna and Emily are not rookies anymore. They're not by any means. But they were, and they've got their experience with those dogs. You had Matt Pavelio before that.
Yep.
Finished the race. And then Suze Tuminelli ran it with me in 2021. Just good, like solid dog teams. Like,
and I guess
like different drivers, but like it's the same. So like she's got a good dog, and she finds great people too. Like clearly, it's cool.
Yeah, and I guess so. The storyline for me that I'm interested. I don't know if Emily and Anna have plans. Like is their time up kind of with Shameless Huskies? Like are they sticking around for next season? I don't know. I don't know like what their mushing future holds. So for me, I'm interested just to see Anna back in a race and see how she does, especially, Emily, I thought she did such an impressive job with her Iditarod this year. I know she didn't win the Rookie of the Year, but she really, I think a lot of people like earned her respect, or she earned their respect, kind of thing. So that to me is a story. Another name we haven't mentioned, Eddie was giving us all that coverage during the Iditarod. He's back out there. He's got a young team.
Is he running the race?
Yeah, dude, he's running the race, man.
I literally saw him last weekend, and he was like, "No, I don't think I'm running it." I literally saw him on Sunday.
What's funny is he every day we did the live for YouTube. He was in the dog yard because he was either coming or going from a run most days. But yeah, he's I mean, I don't think he has like any expectation because his team's so young, but if I'm being honest, like his track record is pretty solid. And, when I look at this lineup, do I think top 5 is a possibility for him? Absolutely. Absolutely. He might not be saying that going into it, but I mean, like this is the beginning of him building up his entire kennel. And I think that this will be a good test for his dogs. James Bourquin is back. He was last year's Red Lantern. We got Jody Potts Joseph, Christy Barrington. So, Anna just ran the Iditarod. Christy runs this. We haven't talked about Quince. He's running this. I love how he didn't quote unquote finish the Iditarod on their terms, but he was able to finish it on his own. That's something that we haven't talked about, but I love that. And so I'll be interested to see how he does in this race. And then Roan Buser is the other person we haven't mentioned, and Kevin Hansen.
Roan, I'll be very interested to see. You recognize that last name, Brennan?
Of course.
And
Buzzer? What is a buzzer? I don't know that last name.
Buser, and I was like, Bueller, what are you saying here? Boozer. Like someone,
Who's having a couple drinks.
Some
right?
booze. Yeah. Ironically, I don't think that Martin's ever had a drink, or if he has, he didn't like it. But yeah. So Roan I think he won the Cusco like 15 years ago or something. And so he's just started up with his wife his own tour and in the Willow area, and it seems like it's going really well for them. And I'm pretty interested to see what his intentions are. Just like intentions at the start line. I'm just like, those are things I don't know. So, but he's probably got some great dogs. Maybe they're young. Eddie's got great dogs, but they're definitely young, and he's just ran them in the T-Dog 100. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if you've seen Roan or his dogs in any race this year, but like a lot of debuts teams, and the some of those ones you mentioned, maybe Kevin Hansen and the Red Lantern guy, maybe they're more of a local kennel or whatever. But yeah, it's I think a really exciting race, and I don't get to really. It's tough. It's a little bit tougher to follow. I feel like being all the way up there, and they're not. There's not.
I will say this: their social media game is really good. The girl who's running it has been very active the last few weeks. So, nice. If you're not following, I can't speak to Facebook because I'm not on that one as much. But when I'm on Instagram, I'm constantly seeing updates. So if you're looking for something outside of watching the tracker, I would suggest that. And then obviously, if you follow their kennels, and one thing, I'll just do a quick shout out. So Tony Ritter, she is a big fan of mushing. And, I follow her on social media. She has her own blog, and, she like put together a lot of breakdown of this race, a preview of it. And on that is a musher roster with, where you can find information on their kennels and everything. So that could also be another way for you to like tune in and get some updates on the race as well. But I think that wraps up our intro. We're super excited for you guys to enjoy this, our next guest. We had a blast. I could see us down the road maybe wanting to like revisit and having a part 2 with her, because like we both said, the time just flew. And then of course it was like a natural, it always happens, we press stop on the record, and we were chatting with her for maybe a couple 5-10 minutes, whatever, afterwards. And like all of that conversation was equally, like, oh, we should have just recorded that too, because it was, like Sean and I were talking, like, gosh, there was something she said in there that really stood out that like we should have just had it recorded. So anyways, any last thoughts before we transition over to the interview, Sean?
I hope I come up with that. I don't know what it was, man, but there was something I got to write this down. I think it was. I think I remember now. I think it was just saying like favorite music to listen to, and that she liked listening to reggae.
Yes.
That's what it was.
That's 100%.
Steel trap up here, dude. I knew it would come back to you. Noggin, dude. Yeah.
Yeah. Like usually one of our quick hitting questions, we ask if you listen to music, what are you listening to when you're on the runners? Well, Sean and I are thinking,
1985. What are they?
Yeah, like 1985. Yeah, like how would that even work? But I guess she'd listened to a couple of our episodes, and she was like, "Yeah, I was hoping you guys would ask me about the music because I wanted to talk about it." So that her answer was just fun. So I'm glad you remember that, Sean.
Yeah, she said she listened. Yeah, she listened to reggae. It was her favorite Mushing music, and maybe she said
She said something about like some
Classic rock.
like there was some sort of island music too that
Oh yeah,
and then she was also into K-pop. Don't I have that right?
That's now. I mean, obviously that's not 1980. K-pop didn't exist. Maybe it did. I don't know, but it wasn't we weren't listening to it on a Walkman in 1985. I don't think. Yeah. But yeah, reggae. Libby Riddles listening to reggae out on the trail back in the 80s. So that's a fun thought of just like 60-mile-an-hour winds and then you just listen to three little birds by my doorstep.
I love it. Alrighty, folks. Welcome back to the Mushing Alaska podcast. We're excited for our next guest. Welcome on the 1985 first woman ever to win the Iditarod, Libby Riddles. Thank you so much for joining us today. How are you doing?
Hey, very good. I mean, actually kind of a little bit ecstatic because it's snowing right now. Oh. I mean, I hate to jinx it by saying that, and it's kind of sticking, and I'm very happy.
Nice. I love when it's like when living in Anchorage, people they're always like, I'm not living there right now, but it snows in March and they're like all complaining, and I'm always like, yes, it's snowing. Like we get an extension of winter. I don't know. I love the late spring snow.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, I'm so jealous of those people that get to go way up in the far north this time of year. Just follow the snow north. Oh, that's the best, huh?
Yeah. Have you done some brick trains mushing?
No, but up in, Seward Peninsula, you could run all through May, and there was still sea ice in June. Used to be.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, up in Teller. Is that?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, the ice didn't go out till June.
Wow. Yeah, I was looking on the map because I saw that you were listed as Teller, Alaska. I did Iditarod archives, and I was like, Teller, I don't know where that is. So I looked, and yeah, it looks like it's got like a lot of protected water, so I could see that staying frozen.
Yeah, it's really neat area. Like you'll see big ships come and duck in there if there's a big storm and they're on their way up to the slope. And then there's all these cool rivers upstream. That's another big basin, and all these freshwater rivers and pretty good country. It's just, I think, too bad they're going to probably put in a graphite mine there. But
good.
So you're in Teller now still, or?
Oh, no, that was long ago, and I lived in Nome, and then after a lot of years up on the Nome River, I moved down the other end of the trail, down to Kenai, and then it was getting really crowded, and I was trying to break my racing habit, so I moved to Homer, which is a nice town, but not the greatest training, partly so I wouldn't even be tempted to race, But it's been a nice place to just goof off and do recreational mushing over the last, I've been here for a long time now, but been doing that and working seasonal in Southeast. So I'm just here in the winters, all right.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so I was asking Sean, I was like, so have you had any run-ins with Libby before? Like how did this opportunity create itself? And I was curious if you remember, maybe you do, maybe you don't, the first time you and Sean crossed paths. I enjoyed hearing his perspective. I was like, I wonder if she remembers what her perspective is. If he tells
me, I probably would. It was probably like Iditarod start or something like that. But I recently go ahead.
It was 2017 Tustamina 200, and then I think one of the checkpoints was at like a school,
right?
And you were like talking to me, and I didn't know, I didn't know who you were, and everyone's all bundled up anyways, and you're asking me questions, and I was like, kind of like, yeah, you like, let me take care of my dogs, lady. Okay.
That's hysterical. Well, not like
that. I didn't, but I was just like, like kind of like going back towards my dogs. And then you're like, oh, by the way, I never introduced myself when you said your name. And I was like, oh,
oh, that's so funny. Yeah. That's just a mile away from where I live. All right. So it's some of those same trail systems you're probably on.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, that was a really cool experience for me. Like a very I was super green, and it was my first winter in Alaska, and I wasn't even supposed to run that race, but my coworker was, and he had like some terrible back pains.
Oh.
And so this is a theme in my mushing career. He got injured, and then I took his place, and they're like, yeah, it's kind of hilly race, and I was like, okay, we had some pretty technical trails, and I was like, but yeah, I had like the Jeff's A team, and they're just like, there was it's all trenched out going down the hills, and you're pretty much can't stop, and it was a wild ride, but it was cool. It was a really cool experience, and then it turned out that race only ran like 1 or 2 more years. So that was
Tim Osmar racing that year, or Monica, those guys?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I kind of remember that because they quit having it, of course. All right, so if they have it, I go watch it, but it's been a while.
I think Sim Smith won. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
It was cool, and there's like one dog on the team that like kept growling at me when I was trying to take his booties off.
Nice.
Jeff was over there whispering like, "Stop it." Anyways, yeah. So that's the beating Libby story. But Brennan, I'm sure you kind of have a little more of a structured question that you'd like to.
Oh, I mean, sometimes we have a tendency to kind of go all over the place. So it's just like, I was curious to hear a little bit about, like, I know that you're from the lower 48. So I was kind of curious, you don't have to give us like your whole childhood, but just like ultimately what led you to get to Alaska? I'm always interested, like I'm the brother who's still, Sean and I born in Atlanta. I'm still here. Sean had, an attraction to Alaska. So, from my perspective in that, I'm just curious, for you, like, what was the draw to getting you to Alaska, at a young age too?
I think a couple of things. For one, like when I grew up, my parents always had us out in the boonies whenever they could. They appreciated being out. We had a cabin on Lake Michigan, Door County. We had a houseboat. We went downhill skiing as kids. We went up in the mountains together, all the families from the campus school, things like that. So I loved, and I just naturally loved that stuff. That was my natural thing just from the time I could even breathe, is I liked animals. I loved being outdoors. I liked plants and all the natural sciences. But then part of it was the times that I grew up in too, because it was, I was just, I was pretty young, but it was like the 60s and stuff. And, a lot of people looking at how they wanted to live and change things and kind of resisting a normal life. And the Back to the Land movement was very appealing to me. And, I just thought, if your person likes animals, a place like Alaska, that's the place to go. Not really knowing how it would turn out, but perfect for me, just perfect.
That's awesome. And so how young were you when you moved to Alaska?
It was, I was almost 17, so I was pretty young, but I was ready to get busy.
Yeah. Wow. And when you got to Alaska, you like what, Sean didn't just jump into things and start, running dogs. One thing led to another, and, he's got this opportunity. He's trying to make some money, just trying to I don't know if you're familiar with the story. Essentially, we have an uncle who lives out there. He did the deep sea fishing, and Sean graduated college and was like, hey, I don't really want to jump into a job right away. I want to explore. So my uncle set him up for the summer, and then he came home and he did a job and whatnot. He was like, I got to get back. I got to figure out a way to stay. And so my uncle knew Jeff King, and that's kind of how Sean got into the dogs. So curious about your story there. Once you got to Alaska, how quickly was it before you were running dogs?
Well, this is a pretty good story in a lot of ways. There was, I must know almost a dozen people from Minnesota that all moved up about the same time. And Oh, there used to be a place in downtown Anchorage, 6th and A Street, and it was like a jointly owned house, and everybody had these gigs where they were out working in the bush or on the slope or whatever. So you'd come back in and you'd stay at this place until you went back out again. And, so that was part of it, a network of friends like that. And also, I found that, like, when you come to Alaska, at least back then, it was like if you really show that you're willing to walk the talk, you're going to have a lot of support from Alaskan people, that know how stupid you are and that you need help. You know what I mean? And so that was part of it. And then I got into dogs pretty easy because I had a boyfriend who had dogs, and I found out really quick, you know what? I don't want to be the person that is cutting this freshly shot horse into 1-inch cubes. I want to be the one on the back of the sled, So I guess I got into it. I mean, it's kind of funny in a way because I never even really cared for dogs that much as a kid. Even as an animal person, I was, more of a cat person. But huskies, they're a whole different thing than a dog, kind of,
Yeah.
a regular dog.
Yeah, I have an Italian Greyhound, which I never knew existed.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so Sean comes home and he's like, what is this thing? Like, what? I don't even know if I can acknowledge it. So yeah, they are a completely different breed. And when I went out there to visit Sean and saw, a dog yard, my eyes were super wide because I just had not heard something like that or seen anything like that. So,
and I tell you, though, I love sighthounds, though. I had one husky that threw back to a greyhound ancestor, and it's one of the coolest dogs I ever had in my life. A friend of mine on Facebook has these Podenco hounds from the Canary Islands. You ever seen those? Holy cow. It's Egyptian pharaoh hound.
Oh.
Type dog.
I can picture the ears that are like close together.
Oh, they're so racy looking. Whoa. Cool.
Huh.
Yeah. So go ahead, Sean.
Well, I'm just like, you your rookie Iditarod, you get in the dogs and like take us, I guess, to your rookie
okay,
race.
So how I raced and all that. Well,
yeah.
I think when I first started racing seemed so out of my capacity that it didn't even occur to me. Like, I just wanted to run dogs because I wanted to do it. And, then you start doing more stuff with them. Like, I've got old journals and, I used to go all over the country at just like 4 or 5 dogs, and kind of started out doing that. And then I had a special sled for just getting firewood, and I get my drinking water with the dogs, and I go visit my friends with the dogs. And then Iditarod Musher, who I had been helping, who was a friend of mine, I met crafts fair because they were making fur hats, and I was making leatherwork. Anyway, before the Iditarod, he said, come run this race in Soldotna. Well, myself and another friend were down helping him with his airdrops and stuff. And I'd never run a race before. I just hooked up 5 dogs and we beat everybody on my first race. So I was like, cool, maybe this is something I should try more of. And, when you get into dogs too, like, to find sleds and harnesses and all that, I got to be meeting mushers who are already into business, and so they always need help before the race. So it was like Alan Perry and Rod Perry and Patty Friend. And, you go to the Iditarod start and watch those guys take off and help them. And how can you not get hooked? I mean, it's so cool. Like, it's like, wow, they're going on that big adventure. So, yeah, and the more experience I got, then I did the work. Like, when I first raced, you didn't even have to qualify, but I had enough sense to go qualify myself, and actually my first race was up there on Denali Highway. They had a race to, I think, McLaren River and back or something.
Mm-hmm. So like you a lot of these Iditarods are like 2.5 weeks out on the trail. Your winning race was 18 days.
Really
like,
long.
What is it is long. And like, what is the schedule like in those days? Like, is it like you run during the day and rest at night, or is it like?
Oh no, we had a good schedule. In fact, even back in those days, Joe Garney was saying, "Oh, we could do this race in 8 days," and everybody's like, "Oh, never happened." But it was just the stuff that happened. Like when we got to Rainy Pass, they wouldn't let us go because they didn't get the planes into the next checkpoint to Roan to send the dog food there. So even if we were willing to go through the bad weather to get over there, there's no gear waiting. So that's why we were stuck for 3 whole days in Rainy Pass, and nobody had food. Oh yeah, nobody had food. Geez, I was getting ready to go ice fishing in their pond and stuff, So some mushers that had connections, like I remember I bummed some food off Roger Nordlum. He had friends with a plane that brought him out some food. And then we had to restart. And then the same thing happened again up by Ophir. We had to stay a day and a half in Ophir. And then, we had so I remember, me and Tim Osmar and who else the heck it was. I'd have to go read my own book to remember. We were going on the way to Shaglup or something like that. And the snow was so deep, we just took turns breaking trail and it was so slow going. And we finally camped for the night. And then here comes Rick Swenson and about 10 other teams behind him catching up to us and just blowing by, But yeah, no, it was something else. All right.
Yeah, I'm imagining that the trail on either side of Iditarod checkpoint was that even? Was Iditarod still a checkpoint? I'm assuming it was.
Oh yeah. Yeah, just some tents and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And that trail's already pretty rugged with us, with the trail breakers out and getting it all set up and nice. And I'm sure there wasn't as many snow machines setting trails and, very slow going on those.
Well, on my first race, I was in the group. We caught up and passed the trail breakers because there was so little snow in the Farewell Burn. They were having a really tough time with their machines,
That's wild.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
That's interesting to hear. Just to go back to, I'm looking at your finishing times. You have 5 finishes, and your slowest finish was your win, and I'm just that is insane, but that makes sense. Like what you're saying, logistically, they didn't have everything kind of set up, so you guys were waiting around.
Well, and the snow was so crazy deep that year too. That's why there was so much problem with the moose all over, because the snow was. You couldn't camp off the trail without snowshoes.
Wow. And that was the year Susan Butcher's team got trampled.
Yep, and there was a moose that stood for a half an hour over Monique Bonnet, without stomping her, which is kind of amazing. Jeez. Yeah, and the rest of us had to be looking at this moose that's in the middle of the trail, and right before you get there, there's a trail that I think Levon Barbie put in where you just zig around the moose. It's not moving still, and we went around that damn moose like that too, yeah.
Wow. Jeez. Yeah, there's been so many moose horror stories in the mushing world. That's just such a common thing, but I imagine even worse back then and with the deeper snow and colder winters. But so I'm thinking was the 1985 year north or south? I was first Leo. That was a south year?
That's a south year. Yeah, I've mostly done south years. I think I only did the other one time.
Did you, when you did the other one, you're like, oh, this is actually kind of nicer, there's a trail.
Oh, no, what sticks in my mind though so much is I hated the mile markers on the way to Ruby because it made me feel like I was going so slow. I was backwards practically, I've been going for an hour and it's only 1 mile,
Yeah.
But no, that's some neat country. That is neat too. I like that.
Yeah, I guess when you did the Denali Highway race, they didn't have mile markers on the highway back then.
I don't know.
Because now every time I'm on that highway, I'm just like, I could do without the mile markers.
that was a pretty epic race. I had the biggest sled you ever saw. I had things like half a bucket of beef tallow in my sled. I had so much crap, I actually made a hole in the snow and dumped a bunch of it in there to pick up on the way back, I think. But, big sled, 9 dogs.
Big highway.
Yeah, there was, I remember Mark Boyley's whole dog team rolled a porcupine on that race. Boy, that was ugly.
Ooh. Yikes. Yeah, like the people ask you do tours, you get the same, 3 questions that are very common. And first, the wildlife is a big question that we get in sled dog tourism. And I always bring up the porcupine being probably the most dangerous animal for a dog.
Yeah.
Next to maybe a moose is the, tide. But yeah, that sounds like a horror story. So
I want to go back to 85 a little bit. I was surprised that like the coverage back then was really good. Like there's really great shots from the 85 race on YouTube that I was just like, wow. But in watching that, like one of the videos was talking about, the storm that you left Shaktoolik to go to Koyuk in. And so I just like kind of wanted to hear a little bit more about
but let me divide that question up.
Okay. All right. I saw the hand go raised there.
Get to Shaktoolik and you're like, middle maybe of the pack or back of the front of the pack or whatever. And how are the vibes? Like you go into the checkpoint, there's like a bunch of teams there. And you got all of these tried and true Iditarod mushers they're sitting there waiting for the storm to like were you like the second you got there you're like, oh, like there's just a situation? I mean, like when you arrived,
nobody else was even there, Sean.
No one was there.
Nobody was there. I was in the front bunch of the race for quite a while there. Like I got a lead accidentally, okay, because I'm stubborn and I'm more stubborn than my damn lead dog is, okay? So my lead dog was a hell of a good dog, but when he was younger, under pressure, he'd do this come haw thing, the thing you want him to do when you see a moose in the trail and you want him to come around, but he was a wise ass about it. I'd say haw and he'd be, what? Come on. He'd turn a big dog team all the way around. And he did that to me on the Cusco with 18 dogs. I had to go all the way back to Calsca and get a hand turning around because, anyway. So we were on our way up the Yukon and we come to this Blackburn Lodge and I didn't know that it was there and it wasn't a checkpoint, but the people were there and opened up their house and they had stew and everything else. And I had just stopped a ways before for 2 hours. But I had a moment of indecisiveness because I was surprised. And in that moment, my leader said, what? Should we go to the lodge? Sure. And I'm like, oh, hell no. We are going down the river, dude, because that's the way it's going to be. So I had no idea that nobody else had gone. I'm not counting teams or anything. So we went all night. It was one of the coldest nights of my life. I mean, if I didn't keep pedaling, my feet were going to freeze, And I was starting to get kind of worried about 4 or 5 in the morning when I still haven't found Eagle Island. And but then finally the trail starts cutting across, and then so I know it's coming. And so I made it over there. But then I had like a 12-hour rest there, and the rest of the way I think it was just Emmett Peters, Levon Barvey, myself, and I passed Emmett somewhere sleeping in his sled on a slough. And then Levon, where did I see Levon? Levon made it into Shaktoolik before I left. And he was like, well, if it's anything like what I came through, you're crazy. But I mean, I just couldn't help but think that this is what I prepared for,
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm just I'm firstly sorry that I don't have the story straight. I haven't read the book. And it's interesting because everybody, you're such a huge part of mushing lore. Like even the casual, Iditarod fan will bring up Libby Riddles mushed into the storm when all the other mush. weren't able to go into the storm, and she did. And so like I've just heard this thing over and over and over, and I'm like, okay, so then in my head I'm like, oh, she got to there's and she passed a bunch of people going into a storm that she wasn't that no one else was willing to go into. It's like I'm sure you've heard something.
So that's part of it, Sean. So there's two key bits to this. Like so, a couple years earlier, the same thing had happened in Shaktoolik. And the only musher that went out in the storm was Herbie Nayakpuk, one of the best bushmen to ever be alive, And he got turned around, came back to the checkpoint, said it was one of the most dangerous storms he'd ever been in. Everybody stayed in the checkpoint and played basketball until the storm finished, and they all had a restart to Nome. And so I had that consciously, it's like, I'm in the lead of this thing. And if these guys catch up to me, that's what could happen. But see, what happened is, so like, I got in there maybe 1 p.m, had a chance for a good shutdown for my dogs, the chance to think about what I was going to do, still have a few hours of daylight to play with. And we went out until it was dark, and then I had to stop and camp. Now, so the rest of these guys are coming in, and the next
You're talking
morning,
about leaving Shaktoolik, right?
Yeah. And the next morning, those guys were coming in through the night. And the next morning, if they would have come out so early in Shaktoolik, if they would have started first thing in the morning and just gone out in the storm like me, they would have caught up to me probably. But they're sitting in the nice warm checkpoint having coffee and eating hotcakes and wondering if I'm alive out there. That was their mistake. But yeah, I mean, and our dogs were used to it too. Like, and your dogs are in tellers half the time. It's blizzarding and just going to the dog barn sometimes, And after I did win the race, even people like Swenson, they would, hire a plane and go up to Unalakleet and run the coast before the race. So if you train in the forest and your dogs aren't used to that openness and wind, it can really psych them out.
Yeah. Was the storm and your experience with all your time training on the coast, like where would you rate that, weather system that you were out in that people had?
Oh, it's definitely life-threatening. It could be. I mean, people die in those storms all the time. You get lost, you go on bad ice. I mean, there's some hellacious storms up there. Those people that live in Shaktoolik are tough.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a crazy place to spend the year. Go ahead.
Did I think I have this right. Did you have to stop out on the Norton Sound during that run?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I stayed in my sled bag basically for the night. Because, I talked with one of the elders in the village, Franklin Panipchuk. I talked with Dick Mackey. He was race marshal, I think. And sometimes those storms died down at night is what we were thinking. And Franklin thought maybe if I get far enough across, I could see the lights and kind of hone in on that. But I mean, it was almost impossible to find the markers during the daytime, let alone at night after it got dark. So, we just, I put everything to where it wouldn't blow away out of my sled, and then spent almost 2 hours, get a pullover parka and get dry clothes. Cause I'd learned before, mushing from Teller to Nome the hard way about sleeping in wet clothes is really stupid, so I made that effort. And once I did, I was actually pretty comfortable in this little sled bag. And, I was out of the weather, and, the dogs just got covered in snow, and I fed them. And, it was pretty intense, definitely. But, I felt like we were safe and we were going to go for it, and I had a bad moment the next day when we were out there because we lost the trail markers. And I found out later the ice had actually gone out, taken the markers with it, and refrozen. Was why there was no markers.
Yeah.
So it was the only time in the whole race, but I took the oldest dog in the team, and that was Joe Garney's lead dog's sister. And I put her up there with Dugan, who'd been in there the whole race. And together they figured it out. In fact, I was kind of cussing her because I thought she was going the wrong way, and she just figured out right where the markers were. So yeah, it was pretty amazing. I don't know how those dogs do that stuff, because when you're in first place, it's even harder to find a trail because the dogs don't have the scent,
How much of that decision was like your competitive juices versus like, and I guess let me take it even a step further back. Like, what was your mindset as you were starting the race in that year? Like, were you like, I'm going out to win this, or like what was
Not really. I mean, well, see, that dog team was really good. That's half of Joe Garney's best dogs and half of my best dogs. And we'd been taking turns with them. One would run the Cusco and one would run the Iditarod. So he had raced this team in their first Iditarod to third place finish. So I knew I had a hot shit dog team. But so to me, it's more like, okay, Miss Riddles, what kind of a dog musher are you? Can you live up to this dog team?
Okay.
You know?
And you know, in the moment, if you could go back to, you know, leaving Shaktoolik, what, like, you were confident? Were you like, shit, this is crazy? Like, where?
I was totally, this is crazy.
Okay.
Totally, this is crazy. But
okay.
You know what's pushing me down that trail is, dude, I was getting ready for that race for like 4 years, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, I had rebuilt my dog team. I mean, every day of the year, you're waiting in line for groceries thinking, am I tough enough to do this, you know? And it was just that focus. I mean, it's not so much that I'm competitive, but I know when I got a lot of work into something that, you know, it'd just be horrible to years later be thinking, oh, I wonder what would have happened if I would have gone out in the storm that year, you know? What a terrible feeling. So, and it was calculated risk because I'd done the work. I mean, I'd go out on the stormiest days in Teller trying to train those dogs, you know? And so I was pretty confident in that dog team. Like I've actually been having to go across there with teams I wasn't quite as confident with in, you know, other races. So I knew those dogs and they know they're going home and they're just born in this stuff. They're really good. So.
Yeah, that's a huge part, I bet, of knowing they know where they're going and they've been on the trail. And when you went from Teller to Nome on training runs, were you going around or are you going across the peninsula?
It depends. Sometimes, you know, actually the time it took us the longest, 3 days it took us. Like if it's good training, traveling, you could do it in maybe 8-9 hours, right? But this one time it took us 3 whole days because we took the road and there was hardly any snow on the road and we wore our plastics out so much. I'm even pushing the sled downhill. We couldn't find the reindeer cabin, so we camped out. The next day it was storming so bad we only made 10 or 15 miles and then we were only maybe 10 or 15 miles outside of Nome, but we broke into another cabin and started a fire and because we couldn't make it all the way. It was too tough. We had 2 teams and 4 people and that's crazy. So, and if you go the long way around, that can be really dangerous too. Like Billy Cavaney, he drowned a couple dogs in a sea ice crack there from Nome one year. And Joe and his uncle, they almost died out in that country in a storm one year. In a storm, like, it was so bad, like they're both on snow machines next to each other and going in this storm, and they decided to slow down and see what was going on. And they had both been stuck the whole time, don't even know it. They're not even moving. You know, so they were gone for 5 days, and I think people had almost given up on them, but they found their way back. So,
jeez,
yeah, that's really dangerous country.
Yeah, it's probably in some ways, you know, more dangerous doing what you're doing in training unsupported. I mean, you probably have obviously, you know, some connections in Nome and Teller and stuff, but like, yeah, you're doing your own thing. Like, it's not like you got thousands of people following the race and stuff. You know, that's what. That's why, like, whenever I run races and people are like our mom, Brendan, worried about me. I'm like, you should be worried about me, like, when we're training, you know, because
I agree.
You know, we're just out, like, alone and there's no one to, like, there's no, like, oh shit, help, you know?
I mean, I started training for Iditarod out by Nelchina, you know, Copper River country, and nobody was out there hardly. There was just me and a trapper that used the trails, and then Rick Mackey and Patty Mackey and little Brenda used to come out every once in a great while. But boy, that was just really good training because it was so rough out there. But anyway, what did you, I forget what, I went down the rabbit hole on that one, forgot what I was going to say about Nelchina. I mean, but it was a good place for training. But I know what I was going to say. It was, yeah, I used to actually leave a note on my door if I didn't show up at Nelchina Lodge on the weekend saying, this is the date I went to Old Man Lake, so if I don't show up, then maybe somebody's coming. Okay.
Nice.
The Nelchina, is that like the Lost Coast? Like, is that near there, the Copper River, like that section? I'm talking about, like that one strip of Alaska coast that's just a straight line on the corner.
I don't know.
No,
I mean, it's on the
right.
way to Glen Allen. It's just south of Lake Louise.
Yeah, gotcha. All right.
Yeah, just south of Lake Louise. I used to train.
Okay.
I used to go up to Lake Louise and then through Old Man Lake, go to Lake Louise, and then I'd come back along the road and then back along the highway, side of the highway, to
So
my cabin.
you're running the Copper Basin before it was a
kind of, and it was such a great place to train for your first Iditarods because it's really rough and it's really cold and yeah, I mean, I learned all kinds of stuff out there. Yeah, it was cool country.
So when you were running, were you like I know like back in the day people did longer runs, even not even that far back, like 100-mile runs were like, Lance Mackey's thing. And like, what was like if you didn't have these 3-day rainy pass delays and like, like if you have it your way in a race, like, and what are the top competitors? Like, I don't know, like, it's hard to like look back at what it was like then for Brennan.
Well,
like,
I think my friends kind of recommended like a 4 on, 4 off kind of a schedule, which I found kind of brutal,
yeah.
And I have to put on both, I was 6 hours. You got to have 6 hours sometime, but it was nice. I had friends that kind of gave me some good tips to get started, but I realized pretty quick, you got to just watch your dogs and figure things out as you go too. It's nice to have a tentative plan, but yeah, you got to kind of watch it as you go. But we did pretty tough schedules. I don't know. I think that maybe the trails are better now. The dogs are probably a little more uptown, training for people now. Like, I don't know, maybe they can train on fast trails. And a lot of times you get good fast trails on Iditarod, but not always. So it's still kind of about the most well-rounded teams.
And okay, so then you get the win. And like when you're like you get
hold on. I gotta take it back a second. I gotta take it back because like we got to Koyuk, right? So I guess to summarize the end of that race, like, is it fair to say that you didn't see another musher until your 8-hour mandatory at White Mountain?
I'm trying to think if I saw one even then. I'm trying to. Well, they must. I don't know. I'm trying to remember. I don't even remember. And they might have been just 6 hours then. I don't remember that either. But I remember I had friends and family come and meet me then. But I don't really recall if there was even another musher in there.
So, like, I guess what that was, I was going to try to lead to is like, at what point in the race did you feel like, okay, I might win this? Like, actually, is it like not until you were on Main Street or downtown Nome, or like what was going through your head?
Well, it's interesting. The whole psychological process is out there in a way. And I never from the start really fantasized much about winning, and if I did, it was never anything past the finish line. Like, I mean, I never kind of thought what was going on. But the other thing is like, I don't believe it's over until it's over. And I still want to focus on the process. And Iditarod taught me the hard way. My very first Iditarod, I was just rounding the Cape Nome, and here's the lights of Nome off in the distance. And I'm like, cool, I made it. And then I'm starving. So I'm looking down in my sled for something to eat. And by the time I look back up, I am totally off the trail. I am spending the next hour wandering the dogs to people's fish camps, trying to find where that, just cussing, wondering where's the trail. Anyway, so that's part of the reason too. I just don't let my guard down until I'm right to the finish. We have had some teams. I mean, my team looked great, all right, but we've had some teams throw a strike, in the last 10 miles, and but excuse me, we used to listen to KNOM on the old Walkmans there. You could get the radio station. And I think I was probably just like less than 10 miles from the finish, and they put on Hobo Jim and the Iditarod Trail song. And I'm like, no sled tracks in front of me and no one on my tail. I did the Iditarod Trail. And I'm like, damn, I'm going to do it, So that, other than that, it probably took a while to hit me, but that's kind of where I first got it.
And I'm also curious if you can just relive what was Nome like. I've never been to Nome. I've always wanted to get there. I would imagine that it was quite a scene, but can you just relive that a little bit?
Oh yeah, there was some good crowds there, and I know all my friends really appreciated the fact. So I knew I had a 5-hour lead, okay, because I'd been in Koyuk for 5 hours and nobody showed up there either, right? And it was so stormy, and knowing that I had this big fat lead, I stayed for 2.5 hours in safety, because I was beat, my dogs were beat. Anyway, not beat, but a little rest was good. We were getting tossed around by the wind. And anyway, my friends thought that was really cool because that made the difference between a 6:30 in the morning finish and an 8:30 in the morning finish. Then you're going to get a better crowd. So yeah, no, there was a big turnout. I got a lot of friends in Nome, and first really local team, to win the race from up there, and first woman. And oh yeah, I was, and there was a lot more teams racing back then too. So you have a lot more people in town just from all their families and stuff too.
Right.
But yeah, practically half my village at Teller was in for the finish, and it was like a win for all those guys. Because when I couldn't even practically afford to get the entry fee and stuff, those guys even raised my entry fee by bingo money and pull tabs and stuff like that. So it was kind of a community effort, really.
Did I read that you were sponsorless the year that you won?
Almost.
You had to pretty much raise all that. You were just kind of like. What do we call it? Balling on a budget, kind of, is something Sean and I have talked about. You didn't have tons and tons of money. You didn't have a massive kennel at the time, I would assume, right?
I mean, we were living subsistence on maybe $5,000-6,000 a year at that point. Okay. But I had some of the coolest little sponsorships, having my old Slant 6 1970 Dodge, the Dragon Slayer. It broke down a month before the race, and these guys jerry-rigged it and welded the bar for the alternator or whatever it was. And I'm like, that's so nice, you guys. When I win the race, I'll tell them you fixed my truck, and we all just have a big laugh. And holy cow, it worked, Another gal at her law firm, she tried to get the law firm to sponsor me, and they wouldn't. So she sponsored me for $500 of her own money, So I had a few little things like that, and the airlines up north, I think it was Cape Smythe at the time. I mean, they all sponsored me, all those airlines. I mean, I was thinking of the Cusco the other day, but I actually kind of hitchhiked to the Cusco one year with 18 dogs. I went with Bering Air to Unalakleet, and then Ryanair took me down there to Bethel. But that was kind of wild. But anyway.
Wow.
Yeah, the Nome thing was pretty neat.
And then one piece that I think is important to talk about, the scene, there weren't a lot of women in mushing, or at least I started looking at the race. I didn't have enough time to look at every single year, but it's 74, 2, 77, 2. We look at where the race is now, and there's a lot more women in it, but what was that like? Was the mushing scene welcoming of you when you first got there? I just kind of was curious about your experience getting into mushing and being female, and like if that was widely accepted, or if there was like you had to kind of like fight for your right kind of thing, or like I'm just kind of curious about that.
I don't know. I guess for me, I didn't really feel like I wanted to make a big deal about it. And if other people did, I didn't care, you know? And I think the other thing is true, like here in Alaska, like people don't care about that. They don't care who you are. You got to prove yourself. If you prove yourself, you know, whatever, but you're going to give people a chance, I think. And then I think I was getting the respect of the guys because when you keep beating them a little bit, then you're going to get some respect, you know? Like I knew, okay, this was a key moment in my career when I was racing the Cusco, and it had been pouring rain and it was just miserable. And anyway, I was grabbing a little food in the first checkpoint, Taliksak or something like that. And Emmett was there, and he's telling me, "Oh, those guys are going to burn out their dogs. I'm staying here 2 hours." Next thing I know, he sneaks off with his team, and it's like, "Damn, I must be getting pretty good if Emmett's BSing me," you know. So I thought that was cool.
Oh, sneaky.
Yeah. Well, like, and speaking of someone like Emmett Peters, is, you know, one of the early champions, and then you've got, you know, that era of like these 1970s champions, and the like Rick Swenson. Like I'm you know, my favorite video of him is just like him being like, "All I know is if you want to win this thing, you better be out front." And I was like, that's like wise words. And just like those kinds of like, do you have any like cool like stories of them out on the trail, or like just you know, what would like Susan Butcher, who came in second place, I think the year before you won. And of course you won a bunch after, like that. Maybe you guys had a fun friendship, or maybe not. I don't know. You know, I don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, the whole woman thing, like, you know, I knew some of the first gals that ran the race, of course. And, you know, Shelley Gill is probably a closer friend of mine. And I knew Verona Thompson, like actually got some dogs from Verona. And I got a few dogs from Susan early on, you know, but I think I was like maybe the 8th woman to ever run it, you know, so it was obvious that women could do it because there had been some before me. But the mushers of that era were pretty amazing people, and I think Rick Swenson was probably the key figure back then. And I mean, he was really the guy to set the trends and to watch, and like he was kind of the George Atla of the long distance world, you know, and very innovative and. You know, but somebody that would listen and get ideas from just any kind of musher that he's ever going to meet, because he's got an open mind like that, you know. But yeah, different types of people out there in those years. Some really wild and crazy characters. I traveled a lot actually with Donna Gentry. Like my first Iditarod, I don't know if you guys know who she is, but she was the first woman rookie of the year, and she's from the East Coast. But I'd done a lot more mushing than I had done. Like, but we traveled together part of that race, and yeah, I think somebody said she'd come in second in the North American to George Atla with her dogs, like and stuff. So she was kind of an early mentor. And Patty Friend, actually, who beat Jerry Riley in a race like in 78 up on the Denali Highway. And I'm like, wow, I mean, you know, Patty's beating him and I got dogs from those guys, you know. And then we were also tied in with Jerry Riley through those guys in a way, because Rod Perry and Patty Friend had gotten dogs from Jerry Riley. And actually on my first Iditarod race, I had 5 dogs that had been in Jerry Riley's winning team. You know, so it was good.
I'm so thankful that when I first started working with sled dogs, that Jeff had named a litter over of like the early Iditarod champions litter. So like, these names are like seared in my head. You know, Jerry Riley, Emmett Peters, and we had a dog. I mean, I can't imagine how many dogs are named Libby, in a dog yard. Because I know we had one, and I know I've met a half a dozen Iditarod mushers that have a Libby, but so I'm thankful that I have those names seared in my memory. But yeah, so cool that you getting to, I don't know. I would love to just go back in time and see like what it was like.
Well, like here's a good story about Rick. Okay, so I'm trying to remember if it was like 83 or something like that, showing up at the Cusco. And Mr. Swenson is like, all right, guys, I'm cutting 24 hours off the fastest time this race has ever been done. Who's with me? And I'm looking at like Myron. Myron's looking at me like going, well, we're going to try, and I think Myron ended up scratching and I ended up, I don't know, fifth or something like that, coming in with maybe 5 dogs trying to keep up with the guy. But, it was being run in almost like 70 hours. And then, so he was shooting for 40 something hours, and blows my mind how fast they can do it now,
Mm-hmm.
But that was typical Rick. It's like,
he was like the first guy, my understanding, to like be like, I want to win, like he, like, everyone else like doing everything he can to get the win. Not to say that other people aren't trying to win, but like, saying you're going to go and cut 24 hours off of the time,
Pretty confident dude.
Yeah. Yeah. Confidence will get you. It'll get you. I'm learning, can get you pretty far.
It's half the battle.
So my favorite quote about Rick Swenson, though, was from Jerry Austin, and this was in Alaska Magazine. It's like, Rick doesn't call a spade, he calls it an effing shovel. So, and that's Rick. He's pretty straightforward.
It's awesome.
I love it.
No, when did you run in 86, right?
No, Joe raced that year, and he was 3rd place that year.
Okay.
Or maybe even second place to Susan
Wow,
Butcher.
that dog team did like.
Yeah, they were
podium
third in 84, first in 85, and then second in 86.
Wow.
Yeah.
One of the all-time teams right there.
Yeah, there was some good dogs. There was some, excuse me, I had 2 sisters that were pups out of kind of a Reddington type of female that I had bred in with one of the Jerry Riley dogs I got from Rod Perry. And then I had one that was out of the similar type of Reddington dog bred in with the Jim Welch Sprint dog that I really liked. And I had those bloodlines for a long time. Like a lot of them even looked like they were, almost like those houndy pointer labby type of looking ones. But they were really tough. And then I had the 4 brothers, litter mates. So when you have those dogs that are all related and they're all matched up in gait and stuff. And then Joe's dogs were so different than mine. My dogs are crazy, screamers that have like some Gareth Rytound and stuff like that, And Joe's dogs, I think a lot of them actually came from Siberian bloodlines. Like he talks about his mom brought him back puppies for a breeder from Anchorage. And, who knows, it might have even been a Norris Siberian. But looking at his dogs, really different. So his dogs would be like, I remember, like when you're hooking up, I've got to get Whitey and stand her up. She's not going to get up and bark. And they start out about the same speed as they finish. Whereas mine, I got to train them for miles to get the yayas out of them so they kind of taste themselves. But together, it was a good team,
So I want to ask you about Joe. You mentioned his name a lot. I guess this is like you guys shared a kennel, or you did a lot of training together. I'm just kind of curious a little bit more about your relationship with Joe.
Yeah, I mean, we went out for, like 6 some years and, lived subsistence up there and combined our dogs for the racing. But, the racing was just kind of one other thing to do with the dogs. Like we hunted moose with dog team. We set nets under the ice by dog team. We visit your friends with dog team. I used to hook up 2 dogs and go to the laundromat, in Tellers. So, yeah. So it seemed like a good way to combine the dogs. And then plus it was a good partnership too, because like, like Joe really knows the land and how to do the whole subsistence thing. And he's got certain skills like that. But when I first got there, he's like worming dogs with ptarmigan feathers and copper filings. And I'm like, Joe, there is a better way, so the combined knowledge, I think, was part of the benefit. And,
Nice.
And you'll see this even nowadays, like people who do that and they take turns racing the team of the kennel. I mean, that's a pretty good way to go. It takes more than one person to really pull this off.
I think of I'm assuming you've pretty much been following this race, ever since its inception almost. And, I think of like the Norwegian team was in the early 2000s. Wasn't that like a thing that they had like a co-op, right? Is that
that was I don't know if that was because of the sponsorship, but it makes sense, especially in Europe, to do it that way. I mean, I'm almost doing a dog share thing this winter with some friends, and that's worked out great. So I love it.
Yeah. All right. So Brendan, when you decide to get into this thing, we can do a co-op. All right.
Do a little co-op action. All right.
Yeah.
There you go.
I like it. So, one thing I wanted to ask you about is like the change in the sport. Like looking, I'm only really familiar with Sean's era, right? Sean's era, just Sean, right? Since Sean got into it. So like when I was watching some of the videos, I'm like, man, that sled looks a lot heftier than what I've seen recently. So like, just can you talk a little bit about how you've seen the sport evolve since you were doing the races?
Yeah, we needed those big sleds for all those big trees we were bouncing off of back in those days. When they fixed up the trail a little bit, it was really different. And I just put a post up, to kind of celebrate my 40th year anniversary about my very first Iditarod. And, I mean, like the communications was all done by ham radio operators. Most of the villages back then had maybe one telephone. So you were a lot more out of reach in some ways back then. We were using black electric tape to put on dog booties instead of Velcro because we didn't even have Velcro. Coleman stoves for, cooking dog food. So, and I think people were learning a lot more still about, the feeding. The trail was rougher than snot. I mean, the farewell burn happened in 77, I think. So going through there in 1980, your dogs are still covered with soot, let alone all the trees that were knocked down and, hardly any snow as normal. So that was really rough. But I think the biggest differences to me is that back then was before we had the corralling. And so you would pull into a checkpoint and people in the village would sign up to take you to their house. So here you come into some village at 3 a.m. There is somebody waiting there, and they take you to their house, and you're hanging up all your dirty, stinky gear in their house, and they're saying, "Sleep on my bed," and $5 can of peaches from the native store. And I mean, it was really more of a cultural exchange because, you make friends like that. Another thing, we didn't have like the quick change runner system. So I remember my first Iditarod trying to change my runner plastics in Galena. And this is a 2-hour gig. And this musher from there, Carson, he helped me take all the screws out. I mean, and I'm like, this guy's my friend for life for that, So that was kind of a neat part about it. But it really makes sense that it evolved past that because some mushers would come in and nobody signed up for them. And then they're sleeping on the cold floor of the armory while the other one has their dog food already made at the checkpoint. And then it's hard for the vets to find all the teams because they're scattered all over the place. So it makes sense why they don't do it, but I still really miss it. And probably the best part about racing back then, no trackers and no social media. And you can't call anybody. And that's half the reason I go. It's like, leave me alone. I want to do my thing, but again, that's an evolution that seems like it's kind of natural. And, of course, it's really great when you're following the race.
Yeah.
It's definitely been in quite the change when it talks to flow of information. And it is a little bit of a bummer, like getting to the checkpoints and you have you got to just go into the one building and not getting to have as much of that connection with the community. But there's still people from the villages coming in and excited to meet mushers and volunteers and whatnot. But yeah, that makes sense. You'd be friend for life if someone's helping you.
Sure.
Helping you like that. And imagine coming in and having your dog's food's already all made up, and that sounds wonderful.
Well, you're not supposed to do that, but some people do. But still, it was really cool to meet people and see how they live and go in their homes and and I would send out, not really knowing where I was staying. Sometimes I would send out just some like gifts or some candy or just something I could give in return, plus I would leave any extra dog food and stuff like that.
Do you when you look at the sled dogs in the 80s in the race and it was something that I heard you say that made me, that was a little maybe just a little unexpected for me, was you said you had some dogs mixed with some hound line or or something like that. I think you said,
yeah.
And and it's always kind of an interesting culture within mushing, when people are getting into dogs and they're like, whose dogs do you have or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are like, they're mine, but then where'd you get them from? What lines, and there's Boozer has he was you got a Boozer dog, got a King dog, and but then after a certain amount of generations, now there's a Deke Natchenborn dog, he's now, you can say I got a Deke dog or whatever. But have you seen, I saw my point when you say there's hounds mixed in some of the dogs you saw or worked with, and you have those half your team that was your dogs that you trained, and then you had Joe's had his Siberian kind of half, but so there was those kind of dogs.
Oh heck yeah!
And it's not like Jeff because I'm sorry I bring him up because that's what my experience was with him and his dogs, but you had those kind of houndy fast dogs back then. So has there been a big change in the physical Alaskan Husky in those 40 years, or has it kind of been fairly similar?
It really depends because, I think a lot of people, when they started the Iditarod, they started out with Rondi dogs because the Rondi had been going on for ages, and back then the Rondi, of course, wasn't as houndy, but they're going for a speed dog, of course, and George Adler would do things like breed into labs. I had a dog successive generations after that they'd still throw back to labs. Rex and Blue, I think they were. So there was experimentation like that. Even up in Teller, Joe's uncle, John Earl Comoke, was where some of his bloodlines had come from. And we took a dog breed book to John Earl one day and had him look through it to try to figure out what kind of dog he had bred to get sisters' bloodlines. And he thought it was a purebred foxhound, because even back up then, all these dogs had come up from the gold rush. They breed them in. You should see 100 years ago in Nome, they had houndy dogs worse than sprint races. They had some real hounds racing back then. But yeah, I don't know. I just, I had one dog in my 1981 team that I really liked. He was raised and trained by Dick Peterson, and that dog didn't know commands, but he'd get down on his belly and pull me out of a checkpoint. And I just liked his drive. And I bred that one to a female I leased from Patty Friend that was out of some Jerry Riley's bloodlines north. The dog's name was, I think, got these really nice cross. Yeah. And Dugan threw a lot of leaders too, but he had bad fur and was a terrible keeper, and the males out of him couldn't hardly gain weight till they were 3-4 years old,
So, Brendan, go ahead.
One thing I meant to ask it earlier, but I was curious, your 3-year, there's like that 3-year run. You said it was like third, first, and second or something like that, 84, 85, 86. Your team's makeup, like how old were your dogs? Are they because I know you ran the race twice and then you wanted to breed your own dogs. So like, are all those dogs in that race relatively young?
They were pretty close in age. Like I think they were about 3 when the 84 Iditarod and 4 when I had raced them in 85. And some of them I was racing over in the Alps when they were like 11 years old. I mean, wow. They were good dogs. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. And then I was going to ask you about, and Sean, I think kind of asked this earlier, but like, did you feel like you had any like rivals, or like, did you, was there any like good smack talking going on between you and any particular musher?
No, but the best one along those lines was Joe Garney at the bar, the Knik bar before the race. Just telling all those guys were all probably giving him a hard time about me running into dogs or something like that. And Joe just told him, he said, "You guys are going to screw around and underestimate her and she's going to beat you." So I thought that was pretty cool. Nice.
I like that.
But mushers, we might give each other a hard time on the trail, but I think we're a pretty tight group in general because nobody really knows about our life except for other mushers.
Yeah, you guys, it's such a cool get together. I think one of my favorite parts of Iditarod is just the unity that it can bring, even though you see people screaming about this and that on Facebook, but to me, what I see is just this awesome community of people virtually, and then also all the volunteers that are just like the volunteers back then. I mean, there was obviously a lot of volunteers, but just I don't know, seeing all these people come together and how much it means to them, and just like when Brendan and my mom and dad and my like all these people came up and we were all like breaking bread together after the Iditarod. Like that never has happened before or since up here. So I'm like, I guess I got to go run the Iditarod again, So that's cool. You get to the Iditarod and everybody's been hiding in the woods with their dogs for the last like 9 months. And so, I'm sure you don't have a whole lot of like, oh, screw this guy moments. You're like, oh, it's so good to see some people that are doing the same thing I've been doing,
Oh, yeah. I definitely think it's more like that, and I don't know. I mean, like I said, you might tell them stories out on the trail about when you're leaving and stuff, but still your friends,
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to stay here for 2 hours. Okay, Emmett.
I wanted to ask you if you had any advice like that you would give your younger self or someone that's aspiring to get into mushing.
Are we doing the quick hidden questions to wrap things up? Is that kind of
we certainly can. Good. Yeah, I mean, we're a solid hour in, so I think we can get to that.
Yeah. Well, this all right. Here's question 1.
Okay, so advice for myself when I was younger?
Yeah, like you've been through a lot. What would, if you could go back and like redo some things or just give advice to someone getting into it, what does that look like?
I'm kind of more the type to maybe give advice to somebody getting into it because I kind of just don't. I think, well, I did as best as I could the whole way along. So what would I do? What would I do different? You can't send yourself smartness that you have now that you wish you had then. You have to learn it all the hard way, pretty much, right? But But I do tell people, like, if they want to start into mushing, they should definitely work for somebody with the dogs first and find out if it's really for them, because it's a huge commitment to get dogs. And if you do this for a couple of years and then find out it's not your thing, what are you going to do with those dogs? Okay.
Yeah.
This is, I think every time you get a dog, that's a lifelong commitment to that dog, pretty much. So there's that to think about. And then plus, if you work for somebody, you learn a lot. And then maybe you make the connection to get some good bloodlines, because starting out with crappy bloodlines is stupid. It takes just as much to feed a crappy dog as a good dog. And there's a lot of good dogs out there. And then I would also say, don't even think about breeding puppies until you've run dogs for enough years that you know what you're looking for. So I don't know. Those are the things that come to mind.
I like that.
And then for rookies, when they're out there stressing out, it's only a dog race.
Yeah.
It's good. Sean, did you have something?
When you're like following, like, how do you like following the race, now that you're retired from, running races, at least, or maybe not, maybe you're coming back next year. We don't know. But yeah, like, how do you like following along, and like, do you like check it? Do you have like a couple of mushers that are running events now that you're kind of like maybe mentoring or just checking in with?
I mean, I just like watching the whole thing. And, there's a handful of like the rookies I don't really know too much about, but I'm a tracker head, just like the worst of them, I mean, it's great. If I get up early, I got to get over there and go check it real quick, and I might go back to bed, but I got to see what's happening. Yeah, no, it's great, the coverage that we have these days. All right. Yeah.
What a crazy
shout out to Sean. Shout out to you, dude.
Yeah, no kidding.
It's been super fun. Just getting high speed internet at Eagle Island. You're like, what? This is pretty special.
Yeah.
And yeah, I swear I would just be sitting at the checkpoint, just like zooming into the specific sector, and then zooming out and zooming back in, and just like it's like honestly way better than me getting on the social media, so I just loved looking at the trackers, and I miss it. I'm fiending, but I'm excited to see Kobuck here in a week.
We get one last chance, and then I get to listen to your podcasts to kind of stay in the role. So, but yeah, no, it's neat. It's neat to see you like getting up at all hours, getting out there, and keeping track of things. I mean, these people work really hard to do this, and it's nice to see them get on there and get some credit and see what's going on, because it's not just during the daylight hours. So
yeah, I loved, like, there was some point where I was just like zoomed in following somebody, just walking around their dog team and just trying to like be fully zoomed in on them, or maybe it's on the dogs too, depending. And just like, I just remember being in behind the camera and just thinking like, this is like we're watching like Sled Dog ESPN right now. Like this is crazy. Like it feels, because I mean, the stream doesn't come in great all the time, I guess, but from my perspective, I'm like looking at this and I'm just like, this looks like I'm watching the Masters, but it's like, which is a golf tournament if you don't, but yeah, it was such a cool thing that we can do that, following getting this up close, intimate look on this thing that when you're kind of infatuated with it in the lower 48, but you really still kind of only have that idea. You see the mushers come in and out of checkpoints for a couple minutes, but like this is giving like a whole new inside look at like just how it and then everyone thinks racing, like the way that a team leaves a checkpoint, like you're not like, let's leave the checkpoint. You are like, you're racing for your dog chores and you're racing for repacking your sled when you're passing through a checkpoint. But like, you get to see these guys aren't actually racing. They're a lot of the time you're like, oh, I'm going to let my dogs take their time. Let's go pee, go poo. Let's go 6 miles an hour for a couple hours and then go up to 8. some of the best racers sometimes aren't really racing for a lot of it because, it's 1,000 miles. I don't know. That wasn't a question. That was just me talking to myself, but.
Oh, that's cool though. But after I raced and won it and stuff, like a few years later, I forget what year it was, but I got to actually help cover the race for ESPN, and also did it with Channel 2. And I'll tell you what a mind-blowing experience for me, because it was like, oh my God, Iditarod is not some religious event. It's just another sporting event, like a lot of other sporting events. And it kind of gave me some distance. So it was kind of neat, and you're getting to watch the other mushers and see what's going on, and, and just the things that are required to, do the filming and stuff too. It was an interesting procedure for sure.
Yeah. Well, you did the wide world of sports thing. Is that what that was?
With ABC.
I remember it was ESPN, and it was sponsored with Dodge trucks. So they didn't have the Dodge truck when I won the Iditarod, so I got to trade doing this coverage for the truck. I think I did it for like 3 years, and I drove that thing for 300,000 miles, I think. So
nice. Did you, when you were doing the coverage, like, was it like what was the format? Were you guys like checking in at the end of each day? Or was it like the beginning of the race and the end of the race?
It's kind of like which checkpoints can you fly into and which mushers are, just like it is today in a way, which ones can you get housing at and things like that. But it was pretty uptown. We worked with Lynn Swan and Diana Nyad were like the main commentators, and I got to do some of the local commentating stuff. But it was pretty amazing.
I can't imagine. Those are like, I guess those are, Brennan, do you know those names?
Absolutely. I don't know the lady's name, but
Diana Nyad, yeah, she was she's a long distance swimmer. Anyway.
Okay. Yeah.
So
Lynn Swan was a famous wide receiver for the 49ers, I believe. Okay. Maybe he was on other teams too, but anyways.
How was Lynn doing when he was landed in Galena, or whatever?
Lynn Swan?
Yeah.
He was such a kick to work with. Oh my God. He was so much fun. Really talented, nice people, really.
Yeah.
Cool.
I want to say when we had Mark Nordman on, he was talking about him as well. And
yes,
saying that
I do remember that.
He was fun to work with. So
there's some like Mark did. So we had him on, and Libby, I think you should give him a listen, because he like dropped some names, and so have you, that I'm like, totally, I know that person is what I'm trying to tell him, but I really don't know who they are. There's some great names. So I bet you a lot of the names that Mark says, and that you would be like, oh, cool. Like, so.
Yeah. One of my friends, that my dog handler gal, she told me about she listened to that, and that was a good one. So.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So who's your, we asked this to everybody, your Mount Rushmore, and it doesn't have to be the most winning musher, then it's a pretty obvious answer, but like just the best mushers to you, top 3 or 4 mushers in no particular order.
Oh gosh, from my era, geez, where do I stop? There's so many good mushers, but okay. I got to start with George Atla and Rick Swenson. And then I want to throw like Joey Reddington and Roxy Wright and Lance Mackey and a handful of other people in there. Dallas, what Dallas has done is amazing. Jeff's had a hell of a career. But yeah, it all starts with George, I think. What a musher. I have a lot of respect for these. Oh, and another one, I tell you what, I got a lot of respect for this Buddy Streeper character. I tell you what, there's something about watching one of those Streeper teams go by. It makes me happy in my heart as a dog musher. It's a train. It's like they're the most well-trained dogs I've practically ever seen in my life, I'll never forget like training for Rondi myself. And first time I ever got passed by a Streeper team was a head-on pass out at the Aurora Trails. My dogs were idiots half the time, I admit, but those guys' dogs would go, none of their dogs even looks at you when they pass.
Yeah.
But pretty amazing what they pulled off. And it's really neat for me to have seen some of these families. Like I first met Buddy, he was a teenager, and the family putting it, like he used to train with his dad. That was the team. And now he's married. They're a team with the girls helping out. And, seeing how these things progress down through time, and the Seavey family as well. I think old Dan is just like me. He runs a little team around still just to get our yayas out, But that's pretty neat to see these families doing this generation again. And I'm really psyched about this, holy cow, Robinson family. I mean, that's the next one to go on Mount Rushmore.
Yeah, we'll see if I think that the scene is theirs for the taking if they want that. And cool, yeah, that's a great Mount Rushmore. It'd be like a lot of faces to carve onto the mountain.
Yeah, it might be too many, but it kind of gives you an idea.
I was gonna say the artist is gonna ask you to like narrow it down a little bit.
Yeah, well, we'll work on that. George for sure is in there. And
I mean, for me, just like George is just like one of those iconic images. I don't know much about. I know he crushed that race a lot, but the aviators with the limp. I mean, he just looks so cool, man. We need to bring the aviators back to Mushing.
You ever watched Spirit of the Wind?
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's the best
required
movie
watching for working at Husky Homestead.
Oh, good. That's such a great film. I love that. But, but such a great dog man. Like, a lot of times it'd be everybody in the village giving him their two best dogs. And, he could take those dogs and make a monster team out of it, and, just has an eye for what's going on with the dogs and like a real innovator type. I think one of the best quotes is he could show up at a race with his lead dog smoking a cigarette, and by the next race, everybody else would be doing the same thing. Something along those lines.
That's awesome.
That's good.
But it's really good as a musher, I think, to try all these different things. I learned so much doing speed racing. Like I did the Rondy twice, and man, I was so proud of how good my dogs did. Like we did within a half a minute of the same time all 3 days on my first race. They loped the whole way around. We were third from freaking last. But it was a good race, Yeah. And I mean, I learned a lot about like how to keep the dogs in the truck. I mean, as a long distance musher, I never used to truck them, and they would just go crazy in the dog box, No routine. And I was like, oh, look at that. You could train them when they're young to go in the dog box. What a novel concept, I
want to run a Red Lantern for Rondy one of these days. That just sounds super fun. Just taking Alaskan Huskies and just high-fiving people and see, you go 14, 15 miles an hour. It's the fastest I've ever gone, and that would be the last place speed.
Well, there was the accomplishment feeling for me in a way was like looking at this little tiny bitty sled. And at first I'm thinking, man, there's no way I'm hooking up more than 5 dogs to this thing. And before the race, I ran 20 dogs on that sled to pick out my 18 dog team. So that was pretty cool. And, it was interesting mentally on the dogs. Like, I don't think much long distance mushers know about that stress of speed racing on these dogs too. Like a lot of dogs can't handle the stress of the speed. My dogs that were such screamers, training for the Rondy, they had all the scream out of them in December, You're serious. And you got to feed them different too. Like they need a much higher meat diet for this. So yeah, dogs would be really muscled up different from doing it. And I bought a leader from Joey Reddington, to kind of keep me moving, but it was quite an experience.
Interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that, and it's two different athletes for sure. You train for that all winter long, and they got the yayas out in December. That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I just have been loving every moment of this, and some awesome stories coming from you, Libby, and
thank you.
Really enjoyed I've learned so much. Like I'm really grateful that you were able to spend so much time with us, Brendan. You know, I don't know if you have any.
I got two
things you want to
questions.
and wrap things up on.
One question that we ask our guests is if there is someone that you would want us to have on our podcast, who would it be? And you know, you've mentioned a lot of different people like from your era, and so I'm just wondering. Usually the question is, who would you want to hear on the podcast? But you got to help us get them on the podcast.
That's a good question. Oh, there's probably a number of people that would do that. You ever talk to Laura Eklund's dad?
No, I did see him in Nome though. And
Neil would be a good one.
Nice.
Maybe Rainey Hall, who was executive director of the race that year. She lives here in Homer. Oh gosh, I don't know.
Brendan's writing them down. Thank you.
I'm literally writing it down. So now
did you ever have Rod Perry on? I mean, that guy can talk. He's got some good stories.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. That's great.
I think you know that you are probably the first guest that we've had on from the 80s and 90s era, I guess. So
yeah,
you know, like this is something that we've been wanting to like go down, and so getting your opinion can kind of help us go with another guest down the road from your era to kind of like keep, you know, what like one thing is like you know, as a lot of like the bigger names and personalities are getting out of it, like we don't want those stories to like, just because they're not in the race, we still want to hear from them. So,
right.
So yeah, so that was kind of the thought process with that question. And then, I know that you've written a couple of books, and we haven't really talked about the books, but along the lines of that, is there anything that like any upcoming projects? Is there anything that you're like currently doing that listeners may be interested in learning a little bit about?
I mean, I'm just still doing the cruise ship gig because it's like such a perfect job for me. So I'm getting ready next month to go to Juneau, and I'm doing shows on board every Princess cruise ship that comes to Juneau, and I tell them all about the whole sport, and a lot of times they're going to go dog mushing on the glacier first if they're interested in it, and then they come to me and I tell them more about the history and my story and Joe Reddington, and it's really a fabulous gig because for one, I get to pretty much be my own boss. I've got a lot of leeway. I feel like I'm doing something good for the sport. I get to sell my books, and I get winters off. So it's like perfect. So other than that, I goof around at home and run dogs whenever I can at home. I've only missed, I think, 2 days in the last 3 weeks or something of running dogs. So I just go nuts this time of year with that. But
I love it.
Yeah, and then back to work pretty soon.
What's the name of your book?
Oh, Race Across Alaska is my main book. And then I've got the 2 kids' books that I did with Shelley Gill and Shannon Cartwright.
Okay, nice. Yeah. I saw one of Shelley Gill's books. I've been working at the Healy School and saw one of those books laying around, and I didn't know. I saw the name Shelley Gale, and I didn't.
Well, and she would be a good one to get on the show too. She's a heck of a storyteller, and her and Verona Thompson and Susan Butcher used to camp out by Joe Reddington's, and they were called Brains, Beauty, and Brawn. So Shelley was Brains, Verona was Beauty, and I guess Susan was the Bronze, but they all trained together. And Shelley's just a great storyteller too. So
nice.
She was in the 78 or 78. I get her at
right after the burn. I'm sure that's that would be interesting.
Yep, they were out there for a while.
Dang. All right. Well, thanks again, Libby. And man, that flew by. That felt like 1 hour, but it was almost 2.
Yeah.
Wow. I didn't even know. Okay. Well, thank you guys. Thanks for asking me on. And Geez, again, Sean, good job on covering the race this year. Really appreciate that. And I'm going to listen to a bunch of your guys' podcasts. And don't die in the heat wave down there in Atlanta. How is it down there?
Thank you. Right now we're still holding on to the transition into spring. So like some days I've got my shorts on, and then the next day it's like 40s and I'm cold again. So
gotcha.
It's that it's like 7 different teases, and then finally it gets fully into spring. So, but the pollen is out. The allergies are active right now. That's for sure.
Do you guys get the cherry blossom thing like East Coast or not?
We do. There's an area where there are cherry blossoms, but it's not like all throughout the South. It's like there's certain areas that they have it.
Yeah, so. Sure. That makes sense.
Yep. But yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you guys.
Go.
Mushing, Alaska. And we also talk about other places besides Alaska, but mostly it's Alaska themed.